Once again, I am an asymmetrical horror game connoisseur on Roblox, and recently, they have become stale. I haven't had much fun of them as late. It's always the same shtick that just makes me bored. I can really only play so much of the same rehashed game with no new ideas before I just start to get sick of it. However, I was recently made aware of a game that intrigued me at first. Those of you who know me, I really like RPGs and MMOs, so the concept sounded particularly appealing to me. A game where I am completely in control of my moveset, my playstyle, and can mix and match whatever quirky thing I want if I get bored. Safe to say, I was 100% on board. And this game is Corrupted Crossroads. And while it certainly isn't perfect, which will be covered in the latter half of this video, safe to say I'm absolutely enamored with it. No other game has really clicked so much with me, outside of like maybe Outcome Memories and Alternate Battlegrounds, at least on Roblox. And yet it gets so few players that it honestly makes me kind of sad. So today I want to shed a light on it and give a complete and honest review of Corrupted Crossroads. If you liked the video, like it. If you dislike it, subscribe, and join my community Discord, and let's not waste any more time and hop into the video. Before I get into the more nitty-gritty of like the mechanics and other things, I do want to point out that the bones of the game are very similar to other games that I have criticized in the past, like Forsaken, although as you'll see, I don't nearly mind it as much in this game for reasons I'll get into, though it's still not hard to see the Forsaken and other modern asym genre influence in Corrupted Crossroads. After all, there is stamina, the game looks very much so like retro Roblox, and pretty much every other hallmark. It's not hard to see the influence in this game. With stamina, I've always said in the past that it felt more like a band-aid fix to balancing, where you don't have to worry about the actual abilities of said characters because it becomes more of a who can run around a bookshelf better. But in Corrupted Crossroads, it honestly isn't that much of a problem. Like, sure, I'm still not the biggest fan of stamina, but I always have said that stamina could be okay if done right, and in my opinion, Corrupted Crossroads is one of those more fringe cases where the majority of the game isn't really about stamina management, unless you pick something very specific, but don't worry, we'll get there. All of that is to say that unlike other games, already off the bat, Corrupted Crossroads, which I will now be referring to as CC, is a game that doesn't overly rely on base mechanics, instead having the base mechanics, well, just be base mechanics, while having many other things to build off of to keep the game feeling unique and fun without it becoming overly stale by relying on something that every character has, which just stops them all from feeling the same. That is a huge problem with a lot of these asym types, and my biggest gripe with the modern asym game formula that games like Bite by Night follow. CC is just a new interesting take on the formula that honestly has just become particularly saturated without also straying too far from the established norms of the genre, i.e. keep the game familiar while also making it unique, which is a hard balance to strike, yet the developers did it perfectly. The survivor gameplay in CC is both, again, familiar and new at the same time. Of course, as with any asym, you have to survive a killer for however long the timer is while doing objectives to shorten said timer, or in this case, open the exits at 30 seconds and have people escape. I will say, I do particularly like this way to win for survivors more. However, this isn't the only way to win as survivors either. If you neglect your tasks, you can also survive until this full timer runs out, in which case it'll still count as a victory for the survivors. This means that there are several ways you can go about playing the game, and all of them have valid strategies. You can have a completely teamwork-oriented team and neglect the tasks and still win, for example, or you could have a team completely dedicated to the tasks to open the gates early for people to escape. Either way, you have complete control over how you want to tackle the round. This is honestly a small but crucial part of the game's identity, and it shows off the overarching design philosophy that the developers seem to have intended, and that is player choice. See, unlike most other games, the whole gimmick of CC is that you have the power to play however the hell you want. Typically, you have a character in an asym with set abilities. A fighter often has some sort of counter and stun, a healer has a self-heal and a regular heal, and so on. This is a great way to introduce balance to your game, of course when the concept of balance isn't neglected, but in CC, the focus is completely on what you want out of your character as the player. With how many different classes there are, each with their own set amount of HP, stamina, and gimmicks, there really are countless combinations you could play. For example, one of my builds is a tank class. He has more health and stamina with the downside that he's incredibly slow. So I leaned into that idea with a passive called Life Steal, which heals me every time I stun, with an active ability and the class exclusive skill, Push. This way, I can play a completely tanky sentinel that is there for the team, but you could also put several other things onto him and make it completely valid. You could absolutely make him more movement-oriented instead with things like the Cola and Overdrive that makes you incredibly fast while still taking HP, nullifying his downsides while still having the higher HP pool. And that is just a one class out of like 20. There are others, like the Wizard, who is pretty bad up close but is great at spamming long-range moves due to him not having cooldowns and instead a mana bar. The Vanisher, who, well, vanishes. Even I like to play them as a long-range stunner who can stun, then run and hide. And even the Hacker, who is a pretty good all-rounder, all things considered, among many more. Hell, you can even play a 1 HP 10 stamina class if you want to. I don't know why you would, but you can. Honestly, you have to jump through some incredible mental hoops to say that this game's movesets are generic. You have to specifically make them generic to complain, and then that argument would not be valid because you're choosing to be intentionally obtuse. Though, this does bring up the concept of balancing a little. While I certainly see this as more of a party game ASIM, kind of like Item Asylum but in ASIM form, there are certainly some things that could be adjusted for a more fair game. Things like not taking unavoidable damage and the ability where they teleport to you, Firebrand doing a hell of a lot of damage, and other minor inconveniences. The biggest one is the lack of stacking debuffs. For example, there's an ability called Freeze Mine. If a full server of 8 survivors decided to play a Freeze Mine build, that would mean it is absolute minesweeper for the killer. There would always be 8 mines in play at any given point. That would be hell. But otherwise, this game is pretty fun in its design philosophy on the survivor side, and we haven't even talked about the best part. See, remember how I talked about earlier how the escaping mechanism works? If you do all the tasks, the exit opens and everyone escapes, right? Well, not everyone escapes. In fact, the last person in the map is forced into a one-on-one scenario with the killer, a last man standing, and the last man standings in this game are pretty brutal. Just look at this last man standing that I had.
But it's called...
Holy shit, I am last man standing in Corruption and there's 4 killers.
You got this, I believe in you.
I'm Vanisher.
Oh, okay. No, yeah. That's easy. Just be stealthy. What? Ugh. What am I gonna do? No, he's dead right now, guys. I'm scared.
I'm locked in. I won. Holy shit.
I told you.
It forces altruism on the team, or selfishness if everyone's trying to leave and someone gets left behind. Most of the time though, it's forced altruism to let the weaker classes and supports get out, while the stronger classes and sentinels do get out for the LMS. It's a very interesting dynamic, especially when the beefier classes more suited for LMS obviously wouldn't survive it because they're low HP, but it's either them die in the last man standing, or risk the person who is playing a class not suited for being in close quarters to the killer, like the Doctor or Wizard, dying because they also weren't suited for last man standing. Is the system perfect? Absolutely not. Let's focus on the killer gameplay. Much like the survivor gameplay, the killer is also completely defined by choice. In fact, even more so than the survivors are. Not only do you get to choose classes, which are all completely unique from each other, going from the rush down Vein Runner to Snowball or Short Tempered, and even a minion maker in the form of Deathbringer. Not only do you get to choose their loadouts in terms of skill, you also get to choose between swords, from the corrupted sword that gives helplessness, to the slower but way beefier Darkheart, to the bane of my existence, the Firebrand, and even the goofiest sword imaginable with Baldi's Ruler. They all, again, have their advantages and disadvantages when it comes to your build, and can completely alter a playstyle for better or for worse. I especially like how certain swords give you the ability for more crowd control instead of resorting to tunneling one person out at a time, like a lot of these games do typically require. It just adds a little bit of extra customization that just honestly makes my day better. On top of this, there are even special rounds, such as Double Trouble and even Infection. See, CC is completely locked in on making sure every round is completely unique, and I gotta say, it succeeded. I know the killer section was pretty short, but I wish to not sound like a repeating record and say that the game is unique in how it presents itself 10 more times. Of course, with all my positives of CC, there are bound to be a few hitches. And while I love the game, no game is safe from my criticism. That's how a review works, after all. You have to give both the good and the bad. The hitboxes in this game, even after the update, are pretty bad. Like, not quite the worst I've ever seen in an ASIM, but it's to the point that most deaths I have in CC feels undeserved because you can physically see me be dragged back a long range, even when I have like 60 ping or lower. This is quite possibly the most frustrating part of the whole game, and it really does start to bog the experience down. Not enough to make me quit, but it's a little nagging thing in the back of my mind. I think it has something to do with the linger and like it moving as the killer moves, so maybe making the hitbox more static might help. I don't know. There are not very many maps, and the ones that are in the game kind of have spots that are annoying. The maps themselves aren't bad, but the jump cooldown is. Maybe make it like 0.5 seconds or something, because the parkour jumps you can make on this is insane. This could be a skill issue, but the jumping mechanic is something I'm not a huge fan of. Don't get me wrong, it is fun to bee-hop around the map, but it gets to a point, man. Like, why can't I get right here? This is obviously supposed to be a killer-only spot, but I can get here just fine. The animations in the game are pretty shoddy looking. They're not bad, but they look very stiff, and it looks awkward a lot of the time. I know I'm accustomed to, like, the god-tier animations that are OMs animations, but they just look really stiff, and a lot of the time, I don't like it. That could just be me, though. Maybe it's a stylistic choice. The OST is good, but a lot of the terror radiuses sound like map ambience. Typically, the terror radius is supposed to alert you to the fact that the killer is nearby, but the terror radius in this game specifically aren't particularly vibrant. They can very much so blend into the background. This isn't the biggest deal in the world, but it can cause some deaths, especially for players who are hard of hearing. That is not to say that the OST is bad, though. There are some absolute bangers. And finally, the last gripe I have is just the somewhat shoddy balancing. This is the least concerning one out of all of these, though, as I stated earlier. This is more of like a party game than a full-blown ASIM. But still, characters like Speedy and the Firebrand Sword can get really annoying if you aren't playing the perfect counterpick for them. And a lot of the time, you aren't playing the perfect counterpick for them. And that is my complete review of CC. All in all, it's an extremely solid and really fun game. Definitely one of the better ASIM experiences I've played in a while. The rating I will give it is a nice, extremely respectable 7.5 out of 10. Highly recommend. Even if it isn't for a particularly long time, this is one of those games you can have both a few quick good games on, then go about your day, or have a grind session on and still be fun. It's a great Roblox game, and I could not recommend it more. And that is the end of the video. Ladies and gentlemen, if you liked the video, like it. If you disliked it, dislike it. Subscribe and join my community Discord, and I hope to see you in the next one.